Houston. And I have the distinct honor of being the father of one of our graduates this morning, Kennedy Houston. I also have the honor of personally knowing the other graduates that will soon sit before you this morning. My wife Gail and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming together this morning to create a memory and to share in a very special celebration with one very special young man and 4 very special young women. Because we can all look back and remember our walks across the stage, and because we often think about where we were on that fateful day, we felt it important to provide that opportunity to our daughter. It only took that one look of total heartbreak for us to know that we had to act. What you will see before you today is a celebration of success that has been achieved by all of our graduates. Today's ceremony celebrates graduating students from the following schools: Frisco High School, Edward S. Marcus High School, Flower Mound High School, Texas State Technical College, and Texas Women's University. If you will, please help me welcome the graduates. All right, graduates, if you will, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have David Raymond with us today, the voice of the Texas Rangers, and our neighbor to give the commencement speech. Dave, if you will, please come to the stage.
All right. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So, wow. That's really cool. It was. This is a pretty neat little occasion right here, and you're just talking to some of the other adults here who've been through more than one of these. We all have the distinct, I guess, memory of not really having much of a memory of our commencements. Like, I don't remember anything anyone ever said at one of these. I've been to like several. So, sort of a daunting task to be asked to deliver a commencement address, but I will say like a truly like an honor. It's a huge honor. You have heard the names over the years. You read the stories, right? Maybe you saw Barack Obama last night delivering one to like tens of millions of people on TV, or you've read about like Oprah Winfrey, you know, super huge names like that going to places like Harvard. You know, there's Steve Jobs, Kurt Vonnegut, Warren Buffett, and a lot more, which I guess is sort of like the perfect segue into my first sort of like obvious graduation observation, which is that life just doesn't go as planned. It's not even close. Right? You're going to see some changes, right? And I don't know what you had planned today who you expected to hear or what you expected to hear today at your graduation ceremonies. You probably didn't care, to be honest. But due to some circumstances beyond our control, you get me. And it's not the plan. This was never the plan, right? But we'll do our best with it. And so what we do know is that you probably had planned, parties going into the graduation, end of year parties, post graduation parties. You probably had some parties that weren't like officially on the books, if you know what I mean. I think you do. But more to the point, you probably have bigger plans beyond today, beyond graduation. And those things are a little bit tenuous at the moment. I think everybody would understand if you guys were nervous. I think it's okay to be scared right now about what the future holds for you. Those of you who are leaving college in particular, right? The idea is maybe get a job or something like that. That it's going to be different than we thought it might be. But it's okay, right? That's why you have your education. You guys are prepared for this. Like when you left for spring break, you didn't plan on it being 2 months, right? It was going to be like a week. It's like working on 3-month spring break at this point. What did you do? Right? How did you adjust to those plans thrown awry, right? Well, you attended classes on your iPads. You went to the Zoom conferences. You joined study groups by phone. You wrote papers. You did experiments in virtual labs. Not in the classroom, right? You did it in your childhood bedrooms. Maybe at your kitchen table. You looked for a little privacy, maybe in a common room floor, something like that. I saw it in my own house. But it was like crunch time, right? You guys are down to the end. You had to push through and get to the graduation part of this thing. And you weren't like looking for excuses, right? You found solutions to the problem. You adjusted on the fly and you ultimately accomplished your goals. And really, you've done more than graduate this weekend, right? I mean, you guys have earned like the equivalent maybe of a master's degree in one of life's most important disciplines, which is resilience. And you're going to be tested more. There's going to be more opportunities to work on that degree and what you've learned. You're also going to find out that this is not like a one-time phenomenon. Yes, the coronavirus is, right? Probably, let's just likely going to be the only pandemic that you live through. But change is a constant reality of life, right? We dream big, for sure. You put together a great plan, and you work hard, and you hope for the right outcomes. Then you adjust to the realities, right? Which is it didn't work out exactly the way you thought. So let's talk about reality for a minute. Like, you guys were not anticipating this reality back in March. There's just no chance. But the class of 2020 will always be remembered as that first wave of young people tossed into this pandemic. And when you walk off the stage today, you're going to be walking into a world with vastly more questions than answers at this point. And you'd be excused for having some mixed emotions about that. Now, on the one hand, you're taking this bold step into more independence, right? You're answering to fewer teachers, fewer coaches, answering less to your parents, whether you're going to college or graduating from college. On the other hand, you're walking into a world that's trying to figure out all kinds of new rules, right? We got new social orders, new priorities, new challenges every single day. You've probably heard people comparing this to, this confrontation we're having right now with the coronavirus as like a war, which is an interesting way to think of it, because real wars, as we understand it, right, require like a group sacrifice. Everybody has to chip in. Everybody has to consider the greater good. And that's kind of where we are. But wars also bring out a lot of really good in people. We've seen it a million times. That brings me to my second kind of obvious observation, right? And that observation is You are what you do. Okay? So when Gail and Doug asked me to do this, I thought, oh boy, what do I say, right? Do I quote like a big politician or Martin Luther King or something like that? I thought, well, no. I'm not going to do that because you've suffered through enough of that, I think, as students going along the way. I'm not a professor, not even close. But I thought, well, maybe I could ask their permission to at least talk about or quote like sports people, because like it's sort of what I do. So I'm going to tell you about this guy. I know he passed away. His name's Jerry Coleman. You may not have ever heard of him. In fact, the likelihood is you haven't. Maybe somebody in the crowd, one of the older folks have. Passed away about 6 years ago. He spent the better part of his life in Southern California, where he was a broadcaster for the San Diego Padres. And so for somebody like me, like that's pretty important stuff. He had a great life, though. He was a great man. And the fans in San Diego adored him. They just thought he was the bee's knees. He was funny, really funny. He was very honest. He was colorful and unvarnished, right? I mean, he had personality through the roof and was not apologetic for who he was. He ended up being voted into the Hall of Fame, Major League Baseball, as a broadcaster. And he was especially colorful when things got exciting. And when the games, you're calling a game and something's happening, he famously, as an example, he had a lot of malapropisms and whatnot, but like a double, right? It's a drive. So-and-so's running first. And he slides into second base with a stand-up double. That would be a Jerry Colemanism. And he had tons of those things. And one of his best all-time was, they had Dave Winfield, who was a young superstar in the game. This ball was hit deep to center field. And he's like, the ball's hit deep. Winfield goes back. He hits his head on the wall. And it rolls off. It's rolling all the way back to second base. This is a terrible thing for the Padres. Details escaped Jerry a little bit now and again. Pronoun agreement, that sort of thing. But he had a way about him, and he was a good dude. And prior to broadcasting, he was a great baseball player. He played second base for the Yankees during one of baseball's all-time great eras, the 40s and 50s. He won Rookie of the Year in 1949. The next year, he was an American League All-Star. His Yankees teams played in 6 World Series. He won 4. But he's also a decorated pilot in the Marine Corps. His nickname, later in life in baseball and everything, was the Colonel. And I love the guy. For all of his accomplishments and his popularity, and this guy was everything. He was like the most down-to-earth dude you'd ever meet. And we built a nice little relationship over the years. One day, we're in San Diego playing the Padres. It's like July 4th, Memorial Day. I can't remember exactly what it was. And they're doing the on-field stuff before the game. They're doing a really nice job, very patriotic. And then they do the big flyover. And I always get sucked into these things. We're never on the air at that moment. So you're standing, you're doing the national anthem thing, and you're watching. And when they have those big ones, I don't know why, but my mind drifts from what I'm actually there to do that day, and I'm just kind of like a fan, enjoying the scene. And I can get sometimes sucked in a little emotionally to it and stuff. And I was like, wow, that was just awesome. It was very powerful. Then, usually when that's done, and we're about to start, you look over to the booth for the other team, because they're friends, and you give them kind of a knowing glance or a thumbs up, like, let's play ball, whatever. So I look over to Jerry. There he is, like a guy in his 80s or whatever, and he's wiping tears away from his eyes. And I'll never forget that. The next day, I go to the ballpark, and Jerry's there, like really early, like hours and hours before the game, right? I'm always there early. So I walk over to his booth, and we just sat there chatting for a little while, and it just kind of goes on and on for like an hour and a half, because as you can tell, I'm not really brief. I have, by the way, like my job, I have to fill 3 hours a night minimum. So sorry, Doc. But so I'm over there just chilling with an 86-year-old man, and we're chatting, and we get to talking about the previous day's ceremony, right, and how awesome it was. We're in San Diego. San Diego is a big military town, and like they know how to do patriotic days. Like they crush it on those things. But as luck would have it, we end up getting going into his military career, and I'd never really asked him about it before. It's not the type of thing, quite honestly, that he liked to talk about. He got a lot of accolades for it, but he didn't want those accolades, and he didn't want to talk about it. But it was just one of those days where he just opened up. And like a lot of people who are funny and everything, he tends to bury like real thoughts and real emotions kind of underneath a lot of that humor. And so he's telling me these stories that are just incredible. I'm telling you, like hair-raising stories. But he delivered it all like it was a stand-up routine. Like for background, he was a dive bomber in the Marine Corps, right? Dive bombers at the bottom of their plane. And then they find their target, and as much as they can't really see that much from up there. And they begin their descent, and they dive down at about a 70-degree angle, 275 miles per hour. These old rickety planes, and they're rattling and shaking. It's jarring and chaotic. They're going basically at terminal velocity as fast as they can. And they find their target, and then they let go of the bomb when they're about 1,500 feet above the ground, which is pretty damn close. And then they swoop up out of the way, right, to safety. All the while being gunned down by these aircraft carriers and whatnot, and their big military. And so, like, kind of a courageous, crazy thing to do. But that's who he was. So he's a dive bomber, and he served in 2 wars, World War II and the Korean War, the only Major League player to serve two wars. During one of his missions, he's being shot at, and they hit, and his engine blows, and oil starts spurting up out of his jet onto his windshield. Now, when you're flying one of these things, he's the pilot, and behind him he's got a gunner. But he can't see anything. And he's telling me this whole thing, like, all right, so I'm heading down this thing, and this son of a bitch, he's shooting me, and boom, 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 oil's flying up on top of my windshield. Like, Jerry, like, what do you do? Well, like any idiot, I made sure my goggles were on, I stuck my head out the window to see what I could see. I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, well, the wind blew the damn goggles off. I had to stick my head back in the plane. I couldn't see anything, and I just kind of used my peripheral vision and, landed in the jungle. Like it was funny or whatever. I'm thinking, my God, this is what he did. So he lands this thing in the jungle, and he's saved by his compatriots at some point. But you can understand why it's sort of hard not to love the colonel, right? I mean, it's just an incredible man. Signed his first pro contract as a 17-year-old kid. He's 80 games into his career. World War II. Lands on our shores. He goes down. He enlists himself in the Navy, which is how he gets to the Marine Corps. Drops everything he's doing and became a war hero. But he didn't do it for himself. He didn't do it for any glory or anything like that. He did it for the greater good. And you don't have to know a damn thing about Jerry Coleman. And you don't, other than what I've just told you, to know who he was, right? His actions spoke louder than anything he could ever say. I've seen him in situations with adoring fans and throngs all around, just wanting to touch him, get an autograph, hear from him. I've seen him in quiet moments, like that day in the booth or at dinner before a game. And I know what he did with his time here on Earth. And that's all I need to know of who Jerry was. Now, during that day, I asked him, though, about being a part of the greatest generation. You've probably heard that expression before, the greatest generation. And he said something kind of comforting and kind that I thought was probably exaggeration. I didn't think there's any way to prove it, and there would never be a chance to prove it. But he said his generation didn't do anything that my generation or generations after me wouldn't do just as willingly themselves. They were not heroes. I mentioned, I said, well, be that as it may, you're known as the greatest generation for a reason. You guys, you changed history. I said, no. History changed us. And you guys would do the same. They didn't ask for World War II, and they weren't hoping to get involved and be a part of history. History came to Jerry Coleman and his generation. And they stood tall. They dug their heels in, and they bent history for the better. So, in much the same way, you guys, you didn't ask for this. You did nothing to deserve this. But it's here. It's history. This is history. It's right here. It didn't come to our shores, right? Like an invading country. This landed on your doorstep. Everybody's. Right? It's in our face every day. And your generation is going to play a very profound role in how we come through this and how we progress. It's going to test your discipline. It's going to test and challenge your characters. And for better or for worse, it's going to accelerate a journey for you of self-discovery. Right? That's kind of an important journey. One other sports person will make this one a lot shorter than Jerry. God, I love Jerry. I didn't know John Wooden, but John Wooden's going to work his way into this thing today. So John Wooden was a great basketball coach at UCLA, and that's an understatement. The likes of this coronavirus is bad for your health. John Wooden was probably the greatest basketball coach of all time at UCLA back in the days when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who that should be contemporary, but I know it's not, was actually known as Lou Alcindor, which is probably way over the heads at this point. So Wooden was an incredible coach. They won like 10 national titles in a row or something. And he was very much into what he did. And as much as he loved to win and perform at their best, he was really, really, and honestly, much more in it for building young men. And to kind of sum up Jerry's thing and all of this stuff in a way, at the end of a longer quote, which was very good, he made a point which I thought is probably the best and most incredible thing he ever said, which was the test of a person's character, right, is what they do when no one's watching. Think about that for a moment. Like, that's a really good point, right? At the end of the day, your character and your personal strength is going to afford you a whole lot more comfort and peace than anything you could ever own or anything you'll ever accomplish. You'll forget that, trust me, pretty soon after this speech. But it is one of those life lessons that you can only really learn through experience anyway, so it doesn't really matter, I can tell you that, but you're going to have to experience it anyway. And there will come a time, right? It's going to be during a doctor's visit, or during a breakup, or after you get passed over for a job or a promotion, somewhere along there. That's when your character and your strength will feel like the only currency you have. And so what I hope you'll do is make sure that you're building as much of that currency as possible in those times when no one is watching. All right, one last thing. I want you just to kind of, the five of you today, to sort of look around and take a little mental picture. Because here we are, right? You're in a cul-de-sac on a Sunday morning, sitting on folding chairs. Got kind of a homemade stage here, neighbor's music stand, and a last-minute C-list commencement speaker. but an intimate gathering of family and friends, right? Now, think about when you left campus for spring break 2020. This is a scene that would have seemed absolutely ridiculous to you. You would have never believed it. Lord knows none of us could have predicted that, like, in the last month, nearly 40 million people have lost their jobs in our country. We're closing in on 90,000 people who have passed away from this virus. And all of us would be asked to make the number of sacrifices and the depth of sacrifices you've had to make to this point and will have to make going forward. My point is, we're here, all of us, but instead of wallowing in disappointment or feeling sorry for ourselves, your parents and your neighbors and your friends cobbled all of this together on short notice to celebrate you, the class of 2020. So try to remember this day. Remember what it's like living through a pandemic. You won't forget it. You can even remember the disappointment of missing out on some of the plans that you had hoped for today or this weekend, right? But more than anything, remember what your parents and your loved ones did for you today. Remember the excitement with which they met this challenge, because they're challenged in the same just as you are. Remember their upbeat attitudes, their joyful hearts. Like, this is a really fun thing that they did today, and they love doing it. And this is a beautiful thing, what's happened here today. Know that success is not a location. It would have nothing to do with whether we did this here or in a big stadium. It has nothing to do with what you're wearing, and it has nothing to do with anything you'll own or ever own. Success is that peace that you're going to have, and knowing that you did your best, and then the satisfaction of doing it right. It does not matter what the world gives you, right? It only matters what you do with it. So, to close, as Leslie Nielsen's character in Airplane, Dr. Rumack, said, probably one of the most poignant parts of the movie, when he stuck his head in the cockpit, opened that door, and he said, "Good luck. We're all counting on you." Congratulations, guys.
For GPA, Dana plans to attend Oklahoma State University and become a pilot, and has received over $16,000 in scholarships.
Tracy, her diploma. Her diploma. Hang on 1 second. Right here, baby.
It's like I'm the universe.
Take it back up again.
Okay. We get it all.
There you go, Dana.
I'm feeling so cool. Top to the bottom.
Hello. I know my hat is falling off, so please bear with me. I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity and for putting all of this together. It really means a lot to us, and we appreciate everyone's generosity during this tough time. So we're graduating and we're thankful for this, but we're thankful for all of you too for being here today.
Top to the bottom, just cool.
Mary's a graduate of Edward S. Marcus High School. She will attend Alabama University in the fall and plans to study human environmental science and will be trying out for the Alabama equestrian team this fall. Next we have Lindsay Cass. Lindsay is a graduate of Flower Mound High School with a 4.4 GPA. Lindsay was in the National Honor Society, and she received a presidential scholarship to Belmont University, Nashville. Lindsay plans to study music business. All right. right, there he is, ladies. Next, we have Jet Sutherland. Jet is a former graduate of Marcus High School. Jet has completed air traffic controller school from Texas State Technical College. Jet will enter the Air Force in August as an E-3 Airman First Class, according to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. Yeah, that's what we thought. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Kennedy Houston. Kennedy is a former graduate of Marcus High School. She has completed a Bachelor of Science with honors in political science with an emphasis in legal studies from Texas Women's University. Kennedy's joined the Delta.
Wow. This is awesome. This is really just the coolest thing I've probably ever seen. And I just wanted to personally thank my mom and dad for sitting at a kitchen table a month and a half ago and saying, no, we're going to make you graduate. We're going to make sure everybody in this cul-de-sac feels loved and appreciated and know that everything that they've done was for nothing. Or it was for everything, but it wasn't for nothing. Yikes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to first start off by saying thank you for coming to this very unusual but memorable ceremony. We'll never forget it. Today we have individuals graduating from high school who are about to start the journey of a lifetime. We also have students who are ending that journey and graduating college today. A few months ago, I was sitting and waiting for the news that our classes would be moved online, all of our campuses shut down, and graduation canceled. When this news aired, it left students with a sense of disbelief and that they were left to prepare themselves mentally to leave this stage of their lives unfinished. However, students, I want to press upon you that graduation is more than just walking across a stage to receive a piece of paper. It's a time to remember the hard work put in by all, the laughs had and the tears shed to get to this moment, the thousands of conversations that were had of what do I want to do with my life and how do I achieve it with our parents and friends. This pandemic has left many uncertain at times, but I am certain about this, that this exact moment is proof that this unprecedented time has brought people back together. Look around. This community has come together to celebrate in a way that not many expected or wanted to. But it's something that each of us graduates will never forget.